formally dressed, and I'm here in casual clothes.
Well, yeah, you don't have the makeup or the attire on, the ceremonial attire, but we are live now. This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube with Northeast Wrestling legend King Kaluha. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Oh, very good, very good. Interested to see what you have to ask. Um, I got a really long history. I just got to try and remember everything.
Yeah, that's the problem. Depending on how many hits to the head you've taken, how is your body? I see you're still wrestling. How's your body holding up after being in the ring so many years?
Well, you know what? That's my excuse for everything is that I have CTE from from all the banging and bumping and everything like that. But right now, I'm probably nursing my second worst injury. Um, my worst was a torn rotator cuff when I had surgery and out for 6 months. That was about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Um, but right now, I have a torn tendon in my quad, and it's not a complete tear, so it didn't require surgery. So I'm sort of rehabbing it, but I'm still wrestling with it. So I'm trying to be careful with what I do, and it's been a tough rehab. I mean, it was a lot worse than I thought it was. Normally, when I get hurt, it's like, okay, I deal with it, and after maybe a few days or maybe a week or two, it's gone. But this one has been particularly nasty. So um, it's thrown off some of the way that I train as far as lifting is concerned. But I haven't missed any dates, so it's just taking longer than I hoped. But other than that, I'm in pretty I'm I'm in pretty decent shape physically.
Yeah, and before I will get into your career from the top, but I remember you from a show that I already told you about. It was August of 91. They called it World Championship Wrestling. I think a lot of the people there were expecting WCW. I think Honky Tonk Man was there. Rick Rude. It was at the Ottawa Civic Center during the Super X.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a couple thousand people there. But you were like the only wrestler as a kid that my parents made me buy the ticket with the allowance. You were the only wrestler that gave me a free autograph. You actually signed my ticket. So that's why I remembered you. And I'm happy to do an interview after all these years. But everyone else was saying no. They were being very cheap to a young kid that just wanted wrestlers' autographs.
Well, I'll give you my PayPal if you feel bad, guilty about taking the free the free autograph. You can pay me now with interest. But no, that's yeah. As far as working with fans, especially kids, even though normally I'm a villain, I still like to. I still like to take care of the young kids that'll come up and ask for an autograph because look at you. You would have seen me like 91, and now now you're an adult and you remember that little thing that I did. So it's good to leave that impression with like young kids because that's what wrestling's really for.
I think you may have been a babyface that night. There may have been a battle royal. I seem to recall, and you may have won the battle royal. Am I
That
am I
is
remembering right?
that is absolutely correct. I wrestled Rick Rude in the main event. I think, or the semi-main event, and then there's also a battle royal, which I won. A couple interesting people on that card. One of the guys, I think Johnny Canine was on that card. If you know his illustrious background.
Yeah, the Angel of Death was as well, I believe. The famous the one from L.A.
That I don't remember.
Okay.
A lot of the people who were on that card, or at least part of it, at least the promotion, was a group from down here called the National Wrestling Federation. Um, and a guy by the name of DC Drake was the booker for that. Um, but it was that organization. So a lot of the other guys who filled out the rest of the card, that's who those folks were. So they were from the like Northeast in the U.S. And then they brought in like the major talent like Rude and Honky.
Okay, that explains it because they did come back in '96, like 5 years later, called the NWF to
Yeah.
the same arena with Snook. I don't think you were on at that time, but I just remember, I don't know how they got away with it, but that particular night they called themselves World Championship Wrestling, and people were expecting, because the main people on the newspaper article back then was Honky Tonk Man and Rick Rude, who
Hmm.
were fresh out of WWE. So a lot of people were expecting WCW, but it was a great show. I mean, I remember it well.
Yeah, you know, back then there was all kind of stuff like that happened. I remember wrestling a card in Ohio. This is my first year in wrestling, and the I think on the card, literally, it was in Ohio, and for some reason there was I think some guys didn't show up. We didn't have a ref, we didn't have a ring announcer, and we had six wrestlers. So they were pushing it as Georgia Championship Wrestling, and they were saying, yeah, these people will be on TV really soon. They're the next crop that will be coming in. So, but we did a show with I think there were six wrestlers. We did three matches and a six-man battle royal, and the people loved it. So it's there is all. It's an interesting business.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you wrestled Rick Rude on that show. He was about to become WCW champion, and just the previous year, in August, he had wrestled the Ultimate Warrior at the main event at SummerSlam. Would that have been one of the bigger matches of your career? Because Rick Rude was hot then, and I mean that was a big crowd from what I remember.
Yeah, it was a good crowd. Um, there, I wrestled like a lot of name guys along the way, and he was one of them. But I did work for the AWA back in the I guess it was like mid to late '80s, and so I got to work with a lot of name guys and for their TV, and so. But that one with Rude that was pretty big. Wasn't the biggest crowd though. Biggest crowd that I wrestled in front of was in Rome in 19. That was about maybe '88, and I actually wrestled Shane Douglas.
What was Rude like? Because we always hear he's kind of an uptight guy, got in a lot of fights. I mean, that means nothing about wrestling because wrestling is a work. But was he pretty relaxed going into that, or was he wanting to be like in control of the match, basically saying this is what we're going to do, or was he taking your suggestions and stuff?
No, you know what? I really don't remember that much. Um, Other than we had to have a decent match because we were um, in the semi main. So with him being the name guy, we just went along with whatever he wanted to do. But like I would do whatever. So it was when a guy like that is wrestling somebody he doesn't know, he's always going to be reserved because they don't know what you can do, if you're going to shoot something or whatever. So, but it worked out okay. I didn't find him to be any more difficult than anybody else.
Yeah, and I mean, I was only a kid back then, but I really remember that match fondly. You're from Hawaii. I actually just visited Hawaii. Beautiful state. What was it like growing up there? And did you follow the local wrestling in Hawaii when you were a kid?
Well, I wasn't there for long, so I really was spent most of my time on the East Coast. I would have loved to. I would have loved to have been involved with that. But the thing is, if you were, a Hawaiian wrestler, an Asian wrestler, you're sort of like one of the. You're just one of the pack. Whereas when I started, I was starting on the East Coast, where there wasn't many Asian or island wrestlers. Not until Alpha and Alpha and Sika opened up their school. Then there was a big influx of Samoans. So you had that Asian that Asian increase of wrestlers. But when I first started out here, I was really the only like Asian Pacific Islander person that were on a lot of the cards, and so that actually got me a lot of bookings because of that.
Who trained you for pro wrestling?
There's actually a guy out here in the Pennsylvania area, a guy by the name of the Concrete Cowboy. Now, at the time, it was between him and then Larry Sharp's Monster Factory. I would have been in the class that Bam Bam Bigelow would have came out of. But this guy that I found was cheaper. He didn't want to tie me to a contract, and it was closer to my house. So I wound up training with him. Now, he's long been gone, but I was like, and he trained a couple of guys, but I was the only guy that lasted, and certainly lasted this long. And I ended up making my own contacts, and then I took over from there. But he brought a lot of guys down from a couple of Puerto Rican wrestlers, one from Philly, another guy from New York, who really helped. It diversified. It diversified my wrestling style because I got to learn a lot more from real experienced guys. So he gave me some good basic training. But then after that, unless you're wrestling with experienced people, you really don't mature that much. And if you're just wrestling with guys from the school that you're in, so that was good from the standpoint of developing my career.
Speaking of famous guys you were in the ring with, I saw in Portland, Maine in '85, you were in a battle royal with King Tonga, Haku, Carlos Colon, and Invader, the guy that ended up killing Bruiser Brody. Any memories of that battle royal?
No, that was that. So that would have been if that was in Portland, Maine. That was with the Mario Savoldi's group, the international. It was ICW then, but then it became IWCCW, International World Class Championship Wrestling, after they had a little bit of a not merger but a common agreement with the Von Erichs. But yeah, I don't remember too much of that. I was still young then. I remember being in the ring with Dory Funk Jr. So I wrestled him, and well, I lit his chest up with chops, and then he unloaded with those European uppercuts. And so after the match, I said, "Is everything okay?" And he said, "That's the way I like it." He said, I like things tight. I like things stiff." And I'm like, "Oh, good. Thank goodness." But I'm looking at his chest. This guy's a legend. And I was wrestling for maybe 2 years, 3 years, and I had him lit up. And I'm like, "Okay, good, good."
I've been watching some wrestling this week that's been on in the gym. I've just been happy to catch it. There seems to be a lot of spots, great athleticism, flips, but it seems like the hard hitting action that you're talking about just isn't there a lot in today's wrestling. Do you also notice that?
Well, the thing is, the a lot of the guys on the indie circuit, which is what this is what I exclusively do. A lot of them are not big guys, and so they just you don't have the same type of impact, and everything is all about flips and high diving and doing 360s in the middle of the air. I right now I'm as light as I've ever been. I'm about maybe 210, 215 maybe. Um, in my heyday, I was 235, 240, and I consider myself average then. So a lot of these guys now are less than 200 pounds. So it doesn't look as brutal as some of the simple things, like even a shoulder tackle. When I'm running it, when I hit somebody with a shoulder tackle, I'm going full speed, and if you don't go down, you're getting hurt. But you don't see that with a lot of guys because they're more interested in doing a lot of the flippy stuff, which I know that's what people want to see now. But uh, I still I still give him more of an old school match, and still gets over.
It seems like the flippy stuff has happened so much for so many years now. It's kind of getting a little bit passe. But you mentioned about the AWA. You were in there around 1985. How did that opportunity come up?
Well, one of my promoters who had a contact with Gary Juster, I believe, who was handling some of the agent work, and we did TV for the AWA. And before that, I was strictly a babyface. But when I came down to their TV, I said, you know what, I want to work heel. And so Blackjack Lonzo was the agent, or the I guess coordinating the matches. And I said, are you a baby face or a heel? I said, a heel. So my first match was against Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, and had a really good match with them. And so that night we did TV. Actually, it was a morning show. It's kind of unusual. It was a 9:30 show. It was in Patterson, New Jersey, and I literally a 9:30 in a morning show, and they probably had, I would say, 1,500 people there, and they were doing TV. My first hour was with Brunzell and Gagne. My second hour was with Rick Martel. Third was with Kurt Hennig. And so here I am wrestling like guys that were like, pretty, pretty good guys. And I think everyone liked the matches that I put together. Vern Gagne liked me because I'd always show a few token amateur moves in a match, so he could put it over. Because with Vern was old school, and so if he saw like a waistlock takedown, he would put that over. So it was kind of funny, but Vern liked me, and I was hoping to catch on with them full time, but then they ended up moving to Las Vegas, so they wouldn't fly any undercard talent out there, and then that was it for them. But I did wrestle two shows at the Baltimore Civic Center, and one was with the Freebirds, and they teamed me with Baron von Raschke. And then another time I had a singles match with a guy that I trained, Tom Brandy.
Who was given the finishes in the AWA when you were there?
That would have been whoever was running the TV.
I see you wrestled Sergeant Slaughter too.
Yeah, I actually I think he liked the kind of matches that he had with me, because I think I wrestled with him once or twice on their TV, and on one of them he had me attack him after the match, and I'm like, is this okay with the office? And I ended up doing after that. We worked a lot on the indies, and we were main event on the indies, and I think he would always request me if he could get me. And So here I am. We always main evented on these local shows, and they drew well back in the day. They would draw 1,000 people or 1,500 people, and I was always working the main with Slarge. So he liked the way I worked, and I complimented his USA style, and that got me a lot of work.
Has the pay for the indies really changed over the years? I know for the bigger stars it has, but I would think even with the exchange rate, probably in the 90s, you guys made more than the average wrestler in the 2020s because it doesn't seem, and I understand the reasons why it just costs so much to put on shows, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of money paid to indie wrestlers these days.
Oh no, no. I'm probably getting about the same as I got way back when. So I got a real job, so that pays the bills. But some of these cards that I'm on, I don't know. Someone's taking a loss because they're not. You're drawing maybe less than 100 people. Some of these indie shows. Back in the day, if we had like 300 people, that was a bad house at an indie show. Now, 300 people is like WrestleMania. So I don't know if the guys on the undercard are even getting paid or not. I know I'm getting my money because if I don't get my money, I simply just don't go. But a lot of these young kids, I've heard of people paying to get on shows, but there's certainly a lot of people that may be getting gas money, if that. So yeah, I mean, if I had to start right now, I probably wouldn't do it. But when I started, there were very few schools around, and so we were in demand. So I could go anywhere on the East Coast, and I did, and I would get booked, and I would see a lot of the same guys because there wasn't a big roster, so it was really exclusive back then. But then over time, everybody opened up their school as long as they had a ring. And then some of these guys didn't know what they're even doing. So as the blind leading the blind, they're running a school, yet they haven't been properly trained themselves. And that sort of diluted the talent pool. And now there's so many guys that are out there, but a lot of them just don't look the part. I mean, they're good guys, they try, but you know, wrestling has always been about the illusion, and you want to have people who are decent sized guys, that are big, that people can sit back and wow and be all of, not like somebody who looks like their brother.
Yeah, and I understand that there's more money to be made in wrestling than ever, and they have more revenue sources. But talking about that show I saw you at in the early '90s, there was at least 2,000 to maybe 4,000 people there. The Attitude Era, when I would go to indie shows, there was hundreds of people there. So it seemed like in the previous quote unquote wrestling booms, it filtered down to the indies more now because it seems to me in the last few years the indies haven't been as hot as they used to be. Maybe it's because there's too big companies and there's just too many major companies. I don't know.
No, I think there's just too many people running. There's too many people running, and running in the same areas. I've seen people running in the same buildings, and they just there's just not enough interest. But even from what I could see, the WWE is cutting back on their house shows, because they're just a TV and a pay-per-view type of operation now. And that AEW, they're struggling just to put people in the seats. So and I just don't think the characters are as exciting. I think everyone's sort of cookie cutter. And I think that's what's dragging the business down. Although I'm hearing they're getting like $300 for the cheapest seat at a WrestleMania. So yeah, that's still gonna draw. That's the flagship. But other than that, you might get a few indies that do things right, and have a steady group that comes to see them. But it's been in my experience that it's certainly not the houses that I've been in front of have been less than remarkable.
One interesting guy you wrestled in the AWA was a very controversial guy, Buck Zumhoff, who I think is probably in jail for the rest of his life now, related to child molestation. Was he a weird guy at all, or was he fairly normal? And you were surprised when you found out about all this bizarre stuff with his daughter?
Oh yeah, I think I was on a couple of cards with him because he wasn't on many of the. I guess he was on some of the TV shows, but not as much. But then when I heard about it, I'm like, oh, geez, you just don't know. I mean, I didn't think of him as being being any kind of perv or anything like that. Although, yeah, a lot of the guys are a little bit risque, but not from that not that bad where there's kids involved. So no, I never knew that was anything that he personally was involved with.
Yeah, I think that's the only wrestler in history I'm aware of that has any charges that serious against him. Thank God. Lewis wants to know: is this the King Kaluha who played Doink when the Iron Sheik cut the promo on the Mighty Maccabee? Steve Carino tells a story about it. I haven't heard this story, but I know that you played Doink sometimes. I think for Mario Savaldi, perhaps.
No, I was doing it. I like to tell people I think I was the original fake Doink, um, the original bootleg Doink. But yeah, that Maccabees game, absolutely, that was where uh, Iron Sheik. I could tell you tons of Iron Sheik stories.
I
Uh,
never heard this story. Could you tell us this story before we get into the Iron Sheik? Because I've never heard anything about this.
I'm not sure. Like I saw somewhere the Carino story, um, and I'm not sure if this is the same story. But I remember him cutting a promo where, of course, the Maccabees games is a basically a Jewish Olympics, and so he was wrestling some guy called the Mighty Maccabee, who was the promoter, who in fact I'm actually working for in March. So he's not a regular wrestler, but I remember him saying one of the promos he was cutting. He said, he said. I am here at the greatest country in the world, New Jersey. I'm saying to myself, no. I said, and then one of his standard things was, oh, he is an intelligent Jew. So, but the thing that had me cracking up was about the most greatest country in the world, New Jersey. So I actually did a roast for the Iron Sheik as myself with a couple of other people, Tom Brandy, and this was the one where who was it? I guess it was Scott Hall went after one of the comedians because he made a joke about um,
Owen Hart, I
oh,
remember that he was
yeah.
Scott Hall was wasted at that time or something.
Well, yeah, we were all wasted at that time because they had open bar, and it was. But when it got tense, and Kevin Sullivan had to break things up, and I'm thinking Kevin was probably drunker than the rest than all of us, but that was a kind of a weird situation, but that was fun because, like I said, we had a lot of stories with the Iron Sheik traveling with him with the Savaldis, and he was probably the funniest guy by far ever to be around.
Yeah, I'm not surprised about Kevin because I was with him not too long before he died, and he was partying right up until the end, even into his mid 70s. Like he was still going out with the 20-year-olds until the
Well,
bars closed.
That's one of the things that I do miss. Like in the when we worked for the Savoldis, we would go up there for like these little 3-day tours, and sometimes the wrestling was ancillary to going out afterwards. So we had some. You would think that Maine wasn't a hot spot to go to, but we'd find whatever the hot spots were. Nowadays, a lot of these kids don't even do that. Even with the big organizations, the guys just go back to the room and I don't know, play video games or do whatever. But back in the day, we were always out, hanging out, drinking, on the prowl. That was a part. That was a fun part of being a wrestler.
And I think it made for better characters too. I know it's healthier that they're playing video games now and they're not going out raising hell, but I think it translated to the characters back then because you guys were just so much larger than life.
Well, yeah, especially if you went out and the rumor was, yeah, the wrestlers are going here after the match, and so whatever bar we went into, it was generally pretty crowded. We drew an audience. Now the heels and the baby faces, we had to stay away from each other. But all I know is we didn't have to buy many drinks though the nights that we went out because a lot of the fans were just like, oh, well, have a beer with us, have a shot, and other types of things as well. So that was the fun days. But now a lot of these indie shows are just one and done, and everybody just goes their separate ways, and these young kids don't even realize how fun it was back in the day.
I'm sure the top people at WWE and AEW have groupies and stuff like that. It doesn't seem like they exist that much on the indies, but they were still around when I was breaking in here and there. In the 90s, how was it? I don't know if you were married or not, but was there more like the rock and roll lifestyle as far as indie wrestling in the New Jersey area back then?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was married like in '89, so I was out of the game by then. But a lot of the guys, again, it was more when we were away for like 2 or 3 days and we were staying overnight somewhere because we'd always be going out. One of my favorite places to go out was Pittsburgh, and sometimes we would go out to regular bars where they didn't know we were wrestlers, but it got out, and then all of a sudden you became the center of attention, and people would buy you beers, and the people that we met at the at the regular bars are probably a little bit more attractive than what we were seeing at the arenas. So that's at least the rest of the guys. That's the way it worked out. But I was lucky because I was married, didn't have to worry about running around what I was going to catch.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. You mentioned you got a ton of Iron Sheik stories. Could you share some of your better Iron Sheik stories? Because he's very popular on this channel.
Oh, I was so we were wrestling up in Long Island, and we the promoter asked if I could drop him off at Newark at the airport. So I was there, with my wife, and I said sure. So I'm driving a Pontiac Firebird, and he insists on sitting in the back. So he's sitting in the back. I don't know if he lit up a smoke in the back or not. But I remember you're sitting here talking, really, really gentleman. And because she wasn't, I think I was just dating her at the time. But he said this is before he was supposed to go back to Vince, and Vince made him go to rehab before before he'd started wrestling.
Colonel Mustafa, is that before the Colonel Mustafa character?
I don't remember. It might have been. So we were driving back, and he said, Mike, he said, my daughter, Nikki, yes, Daddy, how come you have to go away for 5 weeks? And he says, well, Daddy has to go to wrestling camp. But he was going to rehab. We did another time. We were
What a reality show that would have been. Iron Sheik at rehab. I could just imagine
oh
that.
geez, yeah. Another time we were in Florida. So it was me, some Russian guy, and Iron Sheik. So we're in we wrestled in the Everglades, in some place in the Everglades, and we're staying at this really seedy hotel in Miami Beach. So there's a guy with a parrot on his shoulder and a big bag of coke, and the Sheik is like, "Oh, my friend," and he's like sharing it with. He said, "You're such a great guy," and he's like, the guy's eyes are going like, "Whoa, my bag's half gone because this guy is sucking up all my coke." So anyway, we decide, and this is like 2 in the morning, and we decide to go out and try to find some place to go out at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we're driving around in we went to Miami, then Fort Lauderdale, and I'm driving this minivan, and again, this is like in the but no, guess would have been the '90s or late '80s. Two guys with shaved heads, which you didn't see that back then. And so anyway, I see a place. It looks like it's a club. A lot of cars. So I go pulling up, and I pull up. I said, "Hey, this place looks pretty happening. Is it any good?" And the guy says, "I don't think you guys want to come in here." I said, "Why?" And he said, "It's a gay bar." And I said, "Oh, okay." So we pull away, and then we're still driving around trying to find some place. And she goes, "Mike, Mike, please, let's go back to gay bar. Just one the beer. The Sheik is thirsty." And I'm like, "No, no, Sheik, we can't go back there." I could only imagine the Iron Sheik at a gay bar. But
He
yeah,
does
that
say he likes to humble people.
oh yeah. That's exactly what came to my mind after I hear some of the promos. Yeah, there would be a lot of humble people around. Uh, and the thing is, I don't think he would have gotten it right away. And that would have been it almost I almost regret not going there because I think it would have been the funniest night ever. It would have been the funniest night ever. But we actually did find another bar. We were driving around in this minivan, and these young kids come up and they recognize him. He goes, "Iron Sheik, that's the Iron Sheik." And Sheik rails out, "Well, where is the? Is there a bar that's still open?" And he says, "Yeah, we're going to this bar now. Follow us." And he, all right, good, "Mike, follow those two punks." I said, "Okay." So we go to this bar, and of course, we drank all night, all morning, and we just dropped him off right at the airport. We went back to his hotel. The guy that I was traveling with, we stayed at his place. We had to go back, and then we had to fly from Miami up to. I had to fly to Newark, and then hook up with a ride to wrestle in Connecticut the same night. That was the crazy part when you would get in at 6 in the morning, sleep for 2 hours, and then um, fly back to Newark. I sat in the back of a ring truck while they drove up to Connecticut. I think I actually wrestled Sergeant Slaughter in Groton, Connecticut at the naval base, and then got a ride back, picked up my car somewhere in Jersey, and then drove home to Pennsylvania. So those are the fun. Those were the fun times. Now it's not as, like I said, it's not quite as fun as that. But you don't have characters like that anymore either.
Yeah, I've been a bouncer for years and seen a lot of people freak out on drugs and stuff. In those years where guys like the Iron Sheik were doing coke, like you're mentioning, did you ever see any wrestler in particular really lose it either through paranoia or just going nuts on drugs like that play with people's minds?
You know what? No, I didn't, but the guys in wrestling, a lot of them are this. That might be normal behavior, so it's hard to separate one from the other. I mean, Iron Sheik. When you can see the way that he used to drink and do the other stuff, it's amazing how he lasted as long as he did. Because
He outlived Nikolai Volkov by like 10 years, I think.
yeah, and Nikolai, unless a beer was free, he wasn't drinking. He wasn't drinking it. I think Nikolai was great. He was another fun guy to be around. but he has the first nickel he ever made.
I
He-
remember about like 5 years before the Iron Sheik died, I did an interview with Nikolai where he was talking about being a vegan and how he was concerned about the Iron Sheik. And then Nikolai died a couple months later. So it's amazing to me that it doesn't necessarily go by how you live, how clean you live your life sometimes. Oh, you may have
yeah,
frozen.
it was funny. I,
Oh, he may have froze for a second. Let's see if he can come back.
yeah, hang on for
Okay, you're back. You
yeah, hang
you
on.
froze for about you froze for a minute there, but you're back.
Yeah, I'm gonna see. Okay, yeah, I thought that I may have switched over to another network, but yeah, I think we were good now. You were choppy. Oh, Nikolai, I've heard a story about Nikolai getting ketchup from the little packets and going back to his room and making tomato soup out of them. So he's he was a piece of work, but he was a fun guy to be around. You didn't want to travel with him though because he always listened to opera in the car.
There's a fan on here, Sunview. Speaking of people that were on a lot of drugs, that wants to know your memories of wrestling for Herb Abrams UWF.
I only wrestled for her maybe once or twice, so I wasn't around him a whole lot, so I couldn't tell you how bad he was. I heard subsequently how much he was major cokehead. But I only wrestled for him. I know maybe once or twice, so I didn't get a whole lot of exposure to her.
One thing I've noticed about those stories, and I never met her, maybe he was a complete asshole, but a lot of wrestlers are dicks, but it seems like they were just trying to get as much money out of him when they could, and like no one was like trying to help him get help for his issues that ultimately ended up killing him. But like listening to the stories about him and stuff, and everyone just laughing at it, it's like, did anyone actually try to get this guy help? Because he clearly had a real problem.
No, you know what? I mean, it's unfortunately a lot of the guys, they saw that he was a money guy, and hey, that's his to do what he wants to. You just want to continue getting booked. Yeah, that's the thing with wrestlers, especially back in that period. If you weren't under contract, you're just trying to get yourself booked. I just saw that story about Steve Williams and with the guy that wrestled as Dave Meltzer, and how he just jobbed him out pretty bad, and it was like a real big joke because um, he didn't like Dave Meltzer, and I'm like, gee, I didn't even know that, but no, I didn't. A lot of my buddies were with him, and I eventually got booked with him, and I think he liked me, but that then it ended. But I know he definitely had some issues. But you know what? A lot of guys have issues too. So it's like this is normal. That's normal behavior. They might
Yeah.
not realize the extent to which he had a problem.
And honestly, it made for better characters, and those people are still around today. They just don't have jobs. I'm not condoning it or anything, but like I heard Piper was partying up until the time that he died, and it was a real. Did you ever come across Roddy Piper at all in your travels?
Yeah, I did. I did. I never worked with him, but I was on a couple of shows that he was on. I was on a couple of shows with Flair. Actually, quite a few. At one point, I was seeing him on a couple of shows. I know I did the one show I did with the Baltimore Civic Center for the AWA. It was a combined AWA NWA show, and that's where I met Rick. Um, And the funny thing about it was we were getting checked by the commission, and I was always trying to see how my blood pressure was in relation to everybody else, because I was never on steroids, but usually 80% of the locker room was, and so their blood pressures were really high. And so the on this particular card, the people with the two lowest blood pressures were me and Flair. And so that was kind of interesting. But Flair could drink all night and then still make it to the gym and work out the next day. So he was pretty amazing from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, and he's still going. He's still relevant to this day. But it's amazing that the amount that he partied, that he had a career as long as he did. But it seems like he was just kind of a unique person. He was always full of energy. I never heard stories about him doing anything other than alcohol.
Yeah, yeah.
He like had like an aura about him that would even like elevate people around him. And he'd walk onto like a flight at 6 in the morning, wooing, and like everyone would be like getting the energy from him and stuff.
Well, I mean, I mean, he lived a lifestyle, but I think it was just alcohol. I think he knew better to get into the other stuff, um, because it is so much more detrimental. Now, of course, I mean, you party all the time, that does add up. But he wasn't a guy that would have abused steroids, at least abused them, because that wasn't his thing. He had a great build, but it wasn't like he was like overly muscular. That wasn't his selling point. He had a great build, but it wasn't that big bodybuilder build. And so steroids with drugs and with alcohol, that's just a bad combination. But I
Yeah.
think he was able to avoid any of the, like, the harder drugs. He not particularly roided out, and it was just alcohol was the downfall, at least physically. But
What
it
do you
is.
think about steroids kind of coming full circle? Because now, I mean, I don't know if AEW does testing. They do have some huge guys, but they allow TRT in WWE, which is basically legal steroids.
Yeah.
They went from being illegal or legal to illegal. Now they're legal again, but under doctor supervision. What are your views on all that?
Well, to me, TRT is just it's just steroid light. But for me, it's always been I've always been against using them. Now that's just me. I mean, I don't judge anybody else if they do. But the TRT, at least, are making these guys look more built like male models than like wrestlers. Wrestlers would traditionally have that big barrel chested type of look, not necessarily a bodybuilder type look. Now, eventually, that's what it got to, and and then the guys were, back, back during the 80s and 90s. You had guys that are really jacked. Um, but now I think they're just doing it they're getting bit. They're smaller guys who are athletic, but they still want to have some muscularity. But TRT is like I said, steroid light, still a steroid. Now, I mean, if you need to take it, if you're older, you need to take it. Well, then, okay, it's a legitimate drug. But I had a doctor that offered me it. He said, "Well, your testosterone is low." But I'm like, well, I'm not having any apparent side effects from it. Now, if I did, I'd consider it. But so far, I made it this far without it, so I don't want to start doing it now.
And I don't care if they test or not because it's performance, but you can't tell me that this guy at AEW is not on something.
Oh
Dude,
yeah, yeah. And the thing is, if you're if you're built like that, I think you stand more of a chance of getting injured. I mean, the guy looks
he
great.
just came
Uh,
off an injury, actually.
Yeah, I mean, because you are so heavily muscled that I think you get pulls, you get tendon issues and things like that, as well as the blood pressure issues. Now, uh, again, but at least he has at least that's something that people like ooh and ah about. I'm sure he's not doing like doing 360 degrees flips off the top rope, but at least that's a character that people could at least find interest in. Other than that, like I said, a lot of the guys all have the same type of build.
Yeah, I don't know what's more dangerous, taking stuff or doing crazy flips that will end up making you paralyzed or something. But I'm going to be involved with a May 3rd Tri State Wrestling Alliance at the ECW Arena, their one and done show. I know you wrestled for Tri State. Could you share some memories of Tri State Wrestling Alliance?
Yeah, that was the precursor to the ECW, and so that was Joel Goodhart. He and a woman, Carmela, had a wrestling store at this flea market, and they had a radio show, and then they started running shows. I don't know at what point he got out of it, but then it was taken over by Todd Gordon, and then that evolved into the ECW with Paul Heyman. Um, Paul actually was booking for the Savoldis before I think he uh, ended up going into running the ECW. They always sort of catered to that hardcore um, type of match, which the Philly people liked, and which I never was a big fan of. Like in some of the indie shows that I worked on, yeah, we did tables and we did chairs, but it wasn't every match. It was only maybe main event you would do something like that, but I just think it just kept on getting worse and worse and worse. It is more dangerous, and I tell people I haven't lasted 41 years by doing stupid stuff just to get a rise out of people. I'll do it other ways. I'm more fan centric than I am wrestling centric. I want to get people excited. I'll tease them. I'll holler at them. But I'm not going to put my health on the line to do something crazy just to get people ooh and ah. So that's just me. There's
Have you
plenty of
talked to Joel Goodhart at all about being on the TWA reunion show May 3rd?
No, I haven't heard anything about it. I'm probably one of the few people that are still around from that time period, because a lot of those guys probably haven't wrestled in in years. I'm not sure who he plans on booking, but I know a lot of those guys haven't probably did anything in the ring for years.
Yep,
Um,
that's true. Someone's asking if you were there for the Eddie Gilbert era of Tri State.
no, who was the person who was booking before that was a guy AJ Petrucci, who used to do some work for WWF back in the day. So he was the booker then. So I was always pretty tight with AJ. So that's how I got in. There was another guy by the name of Larry Winters um, who trained a lot of those guys as well. Again, a few of those guys came from Larry Sharp's school too. Um, but I was gone by the time Eddie Gilbert got there. And again, at that point, I just don't think my style fit in well with the style that they had.
You did have an ECW world title match against Jimmy Snuka, though, that you qualified for by winning a battle royal. You seem to have a big history of winning battle royals.
Yeah.
But could you tell us about that?
No, Yeah, I liked working with Jimmy. Jimmy, I worked with him. I worked against him in a couple of different federations, and we always had a good look. I think we had more fun after the shows at the bars than anything. But but Jimmy was good to work with, and we had a good look together because we're two island people, and it was fun to work with. I don't. I vaguely remember that. I know I wrestled for him. I wrestled in there. I also wrestled. I wrestled Don Morocco also for that for Todd Gordon. I guess it would have been ECW at that point. So I also wrestled with him too. Who by the way,
We lost you, but yeah, please share your memories of Don. I just interviewed him at his home in Hawaii.
yeah, I actually, if there was one guy who I thought was like the best in my book, it was him. And I think some of my style a little bit as far as my pacing my pacing in the ring is concerned. I think I picked up a lot by watching him. But he was by far my favorite. I think he was complete. He had a great look even before he got really gassed up. Great look, great wrestler, great interview, great in the ring with 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 antagonizing the audience. I actually had a drink with him. I was out in Hawaii a couple of years ago, and we met up. It's actually my birthday. I met up with him, and we had a couple of drinks. And he said he can't. His knees are so messed up he can't get in planes any longer, fly over. That's why you never see him at any of these wrestling events, these wrestling reunions, because his knees are so bad.
Yeah, he actually has a golf cart that he drives to the beach and he swims. But he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met in wrestling, and I've met a million wrestlers. Mick Foley, you also work with. Could you touch on him?
So it was funny. The guy who hooked me up with the AWA, guy by the name of Mark Tendler. He was a promoter out in New York, New Jersey. Real character, real character. I could tell stories about him. He actually ended up getting whacked. He was running a couple of strip bars, and he got whacked up in Jersey or New York. But he booked a lot of stuff with Dominic DeNucci's guys, which was where Cactus came from. So they actually booked us together, and this was back when they had the Islanders. They had, I guess it was one of the Samoans, and yeah, Tama, and I think and Haku, and so they booked me and Mick Foley as the Islanders. I said, well, that's pretty funny. We're going to be the Long Islanders. but yeah, I worked with I tugged with Mick a couple of times. We used to be a lot of the same shows. He did crazy stuff all the time. The one thing I remember, this is when we wrestled in Rome. We had about first night we had 12,000 people. Second night 14,000 with Inoki and Alan Kovich, Bad News Brown. They were on top, and we were in a battle royal, of course. And I see Jack getting thrown out, and he ends up getting on a table and going for a pile driver. The guy backdrops him from the table over the barricade onto the floor, and literally I just stopped, and I was like, what the heck is he doing? I see he's going to kill himself. But that's how he made his bones, by doing stuff that was really really crazy. And Mick is a really intelligent guy too, but he's paying the price now, I'm sure, but he made the money. So it's yeah, Jack's a good guy. Jack's a good guy. He was funny. He was not a slave to fashion either. I remember him going to getting clothes at the at a thrift store, and he had this suit that didn't fit right, and he just used to make fun of him. But he did good though. He did good.
He definitely made his money. Lewis wants to know, did you have any temptation to come back when Carino was doing the King of Old School gimmick in ECW? I guess you had a relationship with Carino, who is an agent with WWE now.
Yeah, no, he was yeah. Steve's good. He credits me for like being a good influence when he first started, because I remember working with him on a couple of indie shows, and I think I was the first like experienced guy that he was in the ring with, and but Steve is really respectful of veterans in the ring, and just of wrestling in general. And so he was actually working at the gym that I belong to, because we live in the same area, or we did live in the same area. He's since moved, and he was booking me on his shows. But this was before when he was working as King of Old School with ECW. I think Paul Lee was still running that at the time. But whenever he had an opportunity, if he was running a card, he'd always book me.
Now, you mentioned a couple times in this you train Tom Brandy, aka Salvatore Sincere. He now does the Patriot on the Indies. Any memories of him? And I guess he's had success over the years in wrestling.
Yeah, Tom's probably my best friend. He approached me when he was a bouncer at a bar that I stumbled into. But we lived in the same area, and he ended up joining my gym, and then he asked me if I train him. And so we really didn't have facilities. So I remember being out with an old mattress and some pads in his backyard, teaching him. And then he would come with me to shows early, and then we would get in the ring and then that's how he got his ring time. And then he was a good build, good looking guy, and people started booking him, and he really did well. I think he got a raw deal when he was working as Sal Sincere in WWE, because he had a great look, and I just think he didn't get the right push. And then when he finished then he started doing the Patriot thing, and he just is a professional. I mean, he knows. He's younger than I am, and after he just got a hip replacement, but he plans on coming back. And he's, like I said, I've probably wrestled him in every possible type of scenario where I was a baby face, he was a heel, he was a baby face, and mostly and I was a heel in tag matches. In fact, one time we wrestled, and he wrestled as Sal Sincere, and I wrestled as the Patriot. So we've done every possible combination, but a real pro. Like I said, we traveled a lot together. Of course, we always used to party together, and like I said, I can't say anything bad about Tom. We were best man at each other's wedding, so we're that close.
I recently bought some footage of the Iron Sheik on the road from RF Video. I have a collaboration agreement with them, and he was on the road with the Iron Sheik. What was the relationship with Brandy and the Iron Sheik that he was helping him out on the road?
Well, I think just we were on. I don't know when he was with the WWE how often he spent time with Sheik. But on the indie side, yeah, we used to travel a lot together, because, a lot of times he'd end up flying in somewhere, and Tom or whomever might pick him up, and so then they'd spend the weekend, because generally they'd have 2 or 3 bookings. And so he got to he would he would be he would ride the Sheik would ride with Tom. But yeah, Tom and I we said the Sheik he was our favorite. He was our favorite, but I think that's probably that was when Sheik was probably doing a lot of indie work because he got a lot of indie work then in between his two stints with WWF.
He was there when the Sheik was driving to the Howard Stern show, so he must have been behind the scenes there.
Yeah, I think that was that. I think I vaguely remember that, but just the stuff that he the stuff that the Sheik would do and say, it was just hilarious. I remember him. He was being at a gym. He was working out. He had his Minnesota Vikings woolen cap on, and he was bench pressing, but he's also doing leg lifts at the same time. And we swore he was going to fall off the bench. And then he goes. Then he has a big bottle, a big pill bottle. I mean, huge, all different kind of pills inside of it. And we're like, how does he know which one is which? But that was Sheik. That was Sheik. Again, he lived a long, good life. I can't. You can't say that the stuff killed him.
He was in his 80s for sure. Is there any Tom Brandy story you could share with us? I don't know him well, but I heard he's very funny. Do you have any stories of the funny side of Tom Brandy you could share with us?
No, some of them are X-rated, but just me and him will talk about some of the crazy characters that we've had. I can't think of one thing that stands out. But because I mean we've been through the wars. We saw guys that, and some of the things you had to be there for. Some of the guys that we wrestled with in matches that really we shook our heads. We were laughing so hard during the match because of the stuff that was going on, because these guys were so clueless, and we just sat there and laughed. I still laugh about one match where Tom was new, fairly new, and it was a tag match, and his partner was Virgil. But back then, it was before he was Virgil. He was Soul Train Jones, and I told Tom this was the worst tag match of all time because no one knew what they were doing aside from me. And I said, "Oh, geez," I said, "I give up." But there's, like I said, a lot of the stuff was inside stuff with us, because when we would sit back and we would like critique some of the stuff that happened, like oh this guy, or oh this guy, or this promotion. But oh geez, I it's hard pressed to think of one thing that really stands out, because get back in the day going out, we'd always have a good time going out, and then we always had to stay stay separate. I think one of the funniest things that I can remember was us, Dick Worley, the referee from WWF. He booked an event out in Ohio, and we were doing paintball. So I remember Nikolai Volkov like shooting the paintballs at us, but he was on our side, and you just sit there and laugh. And there was I don't know if you remember Silo Sam, a real big guy, who was in Pee-wee's Adventure.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, so he had this one leg that was like really larger than the other one. I guess, I don't know, some type of cellulitis, and his leg was sticking out. And I remember us trying to hit his leg, but no one could shoot straight enough to hit his leg. It might have killed him if we hit him. But I just remember me and Tom trying to hit it, and we just couldn't. So we weren't good marksmen, or at least with paintball.
Yeah, here's a picture of Silo Sam for the fans that don't know him. There he is, right there. Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And yeah, there's a fan on here. I don't know if it's a fan or somebody that knows you. It's What's Up Kaluha. It's Hassanation or Hassanator. You know who this is? The Hassanator.
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember Hassanator. Yeah. What are you doing on there?
Well, people are checking you out, but where can they follow you? I appreciate your time. I appreciate the great stories. Where can people follow you?
Uh, well, really, the only thing that I have in terms of social media, just Facebook under Michael Kaluha. I'm about at 5,000, but if people want to send me send a friend request, I friend anybody. Um, and then once I hit 5,000, I go through and delete all the fake profiles that are out there that that are no longer have accounts. Um, and then I do if you're in the I do a lot of stuff in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, sometimes New York. So I'm always around. If there's anybody that's running shows, I'm always willing to travel as long as there's a budget for me. But yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Very good. Well, it's great talking to you. As I said, you were literally, for any fan watching this, King Kaluha was literally out of that whole WCW/NWF show. He was the only wrestler that gave me a free autograph. Everyone else said I would have to pay $20. So I'll always appreciate that. I think you're a great guy. I appreciate the wonderful stories. I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to tell the fans. Oh, I guess he's frozen. So we'll just end it at that. Follow King Kaluha on Facebook.